So welcome to today's session. I generally like to conduct my sessions as an opportunity for you to ask questions throughout. And so if you have a question as we go through the course of my presentation, please feel free to raise your hand. Come on in. We're just getting started. About crafting your competitive applications. I'm an assistant dean of graduate programs at the Ohio State University College of Engineering, and I'm also an assistant professor of practice in biomedical engineering. Do we have any engineers in the room? Awesome. Okay. So today, as I was just telling the two students who are already here, I like to organize or run my presentations in allowing students to ask questions along the way. So if during the course of my presentation you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we can have that dialogue and then I can pick up from there, okay? So there are, at least at Ohio State and in most institutions, there are going to be 6 distinct components when applying to a graduate program. And Caitlin, am I allowed to shift? Will the camera still pick me up if I sort of move around up here in the front?
Let me come up and actually check.
Okay, because I sort of like to move.
We'll definitely shift moving this way.
Okay. So I like to point out that there are generally 6 components to an application. Some programs do require a GRE, and that will be the final component. But just to walk you through those, at Ohio State in particular, the first part of the application is online. It's an online application, and many institutions do have some sort of online or automated system for you to apply. Along with that, you're going to need to provide your transcripts. Usually at the institution that you are from, if you're applying to that institution, you don't have to provide transcripts because you're already pursuing an undergraduate degree at that institution. This will apply typically for institutions in which you are applying to outside of your home institution. So you need to provide transcripts from all of the institutions that you have taken any coursework at the undergraduate level, coursework for any coursework you've taken at the undergraduate level for any institution that you've attended to take that coursework. You'll also need to provide a resume or a CV. Typically, it's going to be a resume, but some institutions will request a CV, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between those two a little bit later in the session. Letters of recommendation are another component, and so we'll talk about the specifics, but typically you'll need to provide at least 2 to 3 letters of recommendation, and at Ohio State we require 3 letters of recommendation. There's also going to be a statement of purpose that's required. Some institutions call that a letter of intent. And so there's the same type of document in which you're conveying your interest in that program, and we'll talk some more details about that later in the presentation, as well as the GRE. Does anybody not know what the GRE is? Are there any questions yet? So, when you're completing your application, first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're following all the guidelines for the application. The last thing you want to do is miss deadlines. Please come on in, have a seat. The last thing you want to do is miss any of the deadlines that are required for you to submit your application on time. You also want to make sure that you are submitting application fees. Some institutions waive application fees for students, so you'll want to look into that and see whether or not an application fee is required. Some institutions don't require an application fee, but if there is one associated with the application, you want to make sure that you're providing the payment for that, because if you don't, then your application will not be reviewed. It will not be entered into the system. The resume is an opportunity for you to show all of your professional experiences, okay? And we'll talk more in detail about that here. And so here are some secrets to successful applications. Preparation is key. You can't really start too early in the application process, and so you're not officially applying early on. How many of you are 2nd, 3rd, or 4th years? Okay, so it's not too early for you to start thinking about your statement of purpose, okay, and preparing for the GRE. And so these are prime opportunities for you to start that level of preparation so that you can make sure that you are reviewing all of the information and retaining the content and coursework that's going to be relevant to helping you prepare for the GRE so that you're able to obtain a good score when you take that exam the first time around. And you want to make sure that you're taking it or preparing for it early enough so that if you need to take it a second time, you leave yourself enough time to do that. Okay? And you can take the GRE at any time. They're offered around the country on a regular basis. You also want to engage in some sort of undergraduate research. How many of you are interested in a PhD? How many of you are interested in a master's? How many of you are undecided? Okay, so if you're interested, and those of you interested in the master's or undecided, are you interested in potentially a master's with thesis or without a thesis?
Both. With a thesis.
With a thesis, okay. And so from that perspective, if you're interested in a PhD or a master's with thesis, you need to be doing some sort of undergraduate research if you haven't already. And so you don't want to wait until your senior year to start doing undergraduate research because that's the time of the year that you're applying to institutions. And so you want to have some established record of some research experience. The reason for this is that you have to keep in mind the individuals who are going to be reviewing your application when you apply. How many of you have a sense of who's going to be reviewing that? Is it staff in the department? Is it faculty? Faculty. Faculty are the ones who are going to be reviewing your application. And so those of us as faculty, we're doing research. Okay? And so what we need to know is we need to know that the individuals who are applying to our graduate programs understand what it's like to be a graduate student. Okay? Working in a laboratory setting. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you've experienced some sort of undergraduate research and you know what that experience is going to be like. So the last thing we want is for a student to join a graduate program doing research and in that first or second semester decide, oh, this is not what I expected it to be. This is not for me. Okay? Because that's a huge investment in your education and a huge investment of your time. Okay, so we want to make sure that you have some sense of what it's like working in a laboratory setting on a daily basis and what research actually entails. Does that make sense? So how many of you have done some sort of undergraduate research? Okay, so there is plenty of time. You can technically start doing undergraduate research as a freshman. Students do continue research as a senior. I'm not saying that it's impossible for you to start doing undergraduate research as a senior, but it positions you better, particularly if you're applying for a PhD or a master's with thesis, if you had some sort of research experience under your belt. But if you apply and it's during the first semester that you've actually started engaging in undergraduate research, it's okay for you to put that on the application. But know that you need to be able to articulate your expectations and your understanding of what it's like to be a researcher, so that will come across to the admissions committee, okay? You also, during that research experience, want to start building those connections. Because as a graduate student, you're going to be working on a daily basis with faculty, okay? And so you're going to be working in someone's laboratory in many instances, and that's going to necessitate relationships with that faculty member. So in order for you to identify the faculty member that you want to work with, you need to start building relationships with them, okay? You may not have an idea of who you want to work with. The biggest or the most important factor is for you to identify what types of research areas you're interested in, okay? And so that's a broad area, say if you're interested in immunology, or if you're interested in DNA synthesis, or if you're interested in viral vectors, or if you're interested in biochemistry or chemistry, you need to have some broad sense of the type of research that you want to focus on and try to identify faculty in those areas. Okay? And doing an undergraduate research then gives you an opportunity to connect with faculty who can then write you a letter of recommendation when you go to apply. Does that make sense? Okay, and so we talked about deadlines, we talked, you also want to follow up. So when you are establishing relationships with faculty, particularly those that you think you may have an interest in working with, say you reach out to a faculty member that you want to do undergraduate research with, and you don't get a response initially. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've blown you off or they're not interested. Faculty may have, 50 or so emails a day, and they just may not have had a chance to respond yet, or they may not have seen it. So I would suggest that you do a follow-up within a week or so, and just let them know that you're following up on your prior email, and you want to express interest in working in their lab, okay? And so in order to engage the faculty about doing some sort of undergraduate research, you need to do your homework as well. And so when I say you need to do your homework, you need to figure out what that faculty member is doing, read abstracts for recent publications so you can get a sense of what's going on in that lab before you reach out. Because you don't want to just reach out blindly and say, Dr. So-and-so, I'm interested in doing research in your lab, and have no interest or have no idea what it is that they're actually working on in the lab, okay? So faculty get dozens of emails from students on a regular basis. You want to differentiate yourself from the rest of those individuals who are sending them emails. And you're going to be able to do that by giving them some information or giving them some insight into the fact that you know exactly what it is that they're doing, okay? And so follow-up will be key. As I mentioned, the resume is another critical component to the application. Some institutions will require a resume, some will require a CV. Most will require the resume. How many of you know the difference between a resume and a CV? Yes.
Okay, so CV has its origins in Europe, and it's more like a scholarly resume, as opposed to another resume, or a normal resume where you have like your education, your skills, your references, stuff like that.
That's correct. And so, just at a very basic level, the CV is much lengthier. It is scholarly, and so it's typically for individuals who are going to be working in academia. And so I have a resume, but I also have a CV. My CV is more than 15 pages. My resume is maybe 2 or 3. Okay? And so the basic difference between a CV and a resume is length. Okay? And so in a resume, you want to be succinct and to the point. You're basically highlighting your education and the reason why you're prepared for that position that you're applying for. It's generally tied to positions you're applying for in industry and also for applications to graduate programs. Okay? Whereas the CV is the document that you put forth when you're applying for a faculty position or some sort of academic type position, which you would include all of your research experiences, your publications, presentations, and the like. Yes?
Would you say it's better to have a general resume that you can just basically say that at any time or to centralize your resume depending on each let's say topics like this, what would you recommend the perfect resume? Something like this.
That's a very good question. So the question is, would you have just one resume that you use for everything, or should you change your resume based on the position you're applying for? All of those are correct. And so if you're applying for 5 different companies, the resume should be tailored to each of those 5 different companies. Whereas for a conference like this, you want to have something that's very general, that highlights all of your skills, but you can pass out to individual graduate programs, right? And so the main difference between those is one is going to be tailored and one is going to be very generic. But you're going to have the same basic content, but it's going to highlight those things that are important to a particular employer, whereas the generic one wouldn't necessarily highlight anything in particular except the information that you want to convey to a graduate program. Okay? Does that make sense? So whenever you're applying for a position, you want to make sure you tailor that resume to that position that you're applying for. Yes?
Are having publications, the research important for graduate school? Like, are they required? Or?
Absolutely. And so many students do have some sort of publications under their belt. It's not a requirement, and not all students do. But if you have publications, you'll want to include that on the resume as well. But it wouldn't be expected that an undergraduate student applying to a graduate program is going to have 18 publications. They may have a couple, 1 to 2 or 3. And so it's not going to be extensive, but that is something that differentiates students who are applying to graduate programs. If you have a publication under your belt, then it's good for you to include that on the resume. And you can even talk about that in the statement of purpose. And so typically resumes are about a page. in length. And so it wouldn't be expected that you would have a resume that's longer than that. Sometimes students have, at the undergraduate level, will have a resume that runs into a second page. And so that's completely okay. There's generally no page limit when you're submitting an application to a graduate program. Recommendation letters, okay? So I want you to pay particular attention to this segment of the presentation. Recommendation letters are a key component of any graduate student application. Can anyone tell me why? Yes.
It allows for the reviewers of your application to get to know you on a personal level and get to separate you from everyone else in the group.
That is correct. And so this is an opportunity, as this gentleman said, for the reviewers to get to know you on a personal level and differentiate you from everyone else. But it also serves the purpose of highlighting your strengths, okay? And so these individuals that you've identified as either knowing you well or being able to attest to your skills and your abilities are going to need to convey all of that information to the admissions committee. And so, as I mentioned, at Ohio State, you require 3 letters of recommendation. And I will always recommend to students that they identify individuals who are faculty or who have a close working relationship with them, okay? And so coming from engineering, many of our students will have done an internship or a co-op. As an undergraduate, you may have had some sort of work experience as well. And you may have had a supervisor who knows you very well and knows your work ethic and knows that you go above and beyond in order to, get the job done. And so that may be a person that you want to write a letter of recommendation. But I would recommend that you have at least 2 of those recommenders that write letters of recommendation for you be individuals with PhDs. The reason why is because the individuals who are reviewing you for admission are going to be PhDs. And so as a PhD, they're going to take those recommendations from individuals who've gone through a similar type of graduate training that they have. They're going to hold that in very high regard, okay? Because they know exactly what it takes to go through a PhD or a master's program, and they understand what it takes in order for what a good graduate student, a strong graduate student, and a strong graduate applicant looks like. And so you want to make sure that you're putting in front of them individuals who have that sort of background and that sort of track record in order for them to be able to convey what it is about you and what separates you from everyone else, okay? And so you may have recommenders cover different facets of you, okay? So you may have your research advisor talk about your research prowess. You may have a faculty member whose class you took, who knows you well, talk about your academic preparation and your savvy and your initiative and your work ethic. And you may have that employer talk about your work ethic and your ability to solve problems and so forth in a work setting. And so all of these together are going to be telling a story about you and about why you're capable of being successful in a graduate program. Does that make sense? Yes.
I would just recommend renewing these letters of recommendation. Like, let's say right now we have a letter of recommendation from somebody who has a very high position as a PhD. How often would you recommend that we use that letter of recommendation in the future? Like, when would be a good time for that? And at what time do you make that conscious decision?
So I would say you want to have letters of recommendation that are written within that year. Within a year. And so if they're older than a year, you want to solicit new letters of recommendation. And I would also encourage you to provide your resume and some highlights, some key points that you want or key accomplishments that you want your recommender to talk about in their recommendation letter. That way you're assured that the person that you are relying on to convey why you're such a good person for this graduate program, they'll have all of the information about your work history, your research experience, any accolades or accomplishments or awards you've received, as well as any publications, your GPA, any relevant coursework to the graduate program that you're applying. those types of information. And it's not uncommon, again, for you to provide, again, some key highlights that you definitely want that recommender to cover. And you may even give them guidance if you're trying to identify recommenders, as I mentioned before, having one focus on different topic areas. Give the individual who you want to focus on your academics just key components that, or highlights you want them to list as it relates to coursework, maybe courses you've gotten an A in, or you the top 5% of the class or what have you, and focus on research publications that you've received or the research work you've done with your undergraduate research advisor. And so it's not uncommon for you to guide the recommender toward providing the information that you want to highlight in that letter of recommendation, okay? And you want to reach out to them early in the application process to make sure not only whether or not they're willing to write a letter of recommendation for you, but you want to make sure you're giving them appropriate time to do so. So I would suggest that you reach out to your recommenders within the semester, early in the semester that you plan to apply to graduate school. So for example, if you're planning to apply this coming fall, I would suggest that you reach out to those recommenders early in the fall semester or when you first come back to campus. Because the applications are going to be due at the end of the fall semester and in the beginning of the winter semester, usually around November, December, January, February. Okay, so you want to make sure you're giving them plenty of time, and you also want to follow up. Okay, and so I get a number of requests from students to write letters of recommendation. I love to write recommendation letters for them, but sometimes I forget. Okay, and so you want to make sure you're reminding them about a month out and then a couple weeks out if they still haven't written it. Okay, and you always want to have a backup in case something happens. The recommender turns out they can't write it or something has come up. You want to make sure you have a plan B so that you can get that next recommendation supplied for you in time for the application to be complete. Okay? Talk about this. Oh, you also, in terms of your undergraduate advisor, you may also want to ask them to be your mentor to help you develop toward preparation for your graduate program. So you want to make sure you're conveying your interests to the individuals that you want to write your letters of recommendation so that they will be able to speak to that in their recommendation letters. Statement of purpose. And so does anybody else know, or does anybody know what a statement of purpose is designed to do? Why is the statement of purpose important in an application? Anyone? Yes.
It lets people know what you want to do.
Yes, it lets people know what you want to do. Anything else? Yes.
It kind of helps them decide you'd be a good fit for what you say you want to do, I guess.
Absolutely. Anything else? Any other purposes for the statement of purpose or letter of intent? So overarchingly, this is your opportunity to differentiate yourself from the other myriad of individuals who are applying to that graduate program. So you need the statement of purpose to be captivating, okay? You need it not to be generic, but you need it to convey several things. You need it to convey why you're interested in this graduate program. So it's going to be tailored to all of the graduate programs to which you're applying. Why you're interested, what you've done to prepare for graduate school, what your career goals are, how this program will prepare you for those career goals, and why you're interested in this graduate program. Okay, so I can't stress that enough, why you're interested, and this needs to be a very concise letter, and so you don't want it to be more than 2 pages in length. Okay, and you can even talk about the undergraduate research experiences that you've had. That's the preparation that you've done in order to prepare for a graduate degree. You also want to, if you've had any issues academically, you want to avoid talking about those in the statement of purpose. You want to ask any recommender that you have charged with talking about your academic endeavors with that task of talking about, why you may have had a bad first semester or a bad first year, okay? Because you don't want to come across as making excuses. but you want to give that responsibility to one of the recommendation writers. Okay. And so when it's all said and done, you want to make sure that you fill in any gaps in, say education. You want to talk about those. If you left school for a semester or a year, you want to talk about, you know, what you did during that time period. You always want to edit it. So I would recommend that not only you edit it, but you have a confidant edit it as well. Say a faculty member or a staff member in your department. Edit that document to pick up on any grammatical errors or any syntax errors or spelling errors that may be there. Because you want to make sure that this is a polished document, because again, it's going to be your one time to show this program who you are and why you're a good fit and the right person for them to admit to this graduate program. Because I'm going to use our college as an example. Some of our programs get over 1,000 applications a year. And so if you're talking about 1,000 applications, you want to be able to put your best foot forward and have your statement of purpose rise to the top. Okay? So this is your opportunity to do that. Because in many cases, the faculty on the admissions committee won't know you, they won't have seen you before or met you. So you're talking about how can I differentiate myself from everyone else who was applying. And this is your one opportunity to do that in your own words. Okay, the GRE. And so, as I mentioned earlier, some programs require the GRE, some programs don't, so you need to make sure that you're looking into the schools that you're planning, the programs you're planning to apply to make sure that you understand whether or not the GRE is a requirement, and if it is, you want to start preparing early, okay? And so I've known students to take the GRE multiple times. If you plan to take, or if you need to take the GRE a second or a third time, you need to plan ahead to make sure you're preparing early enough so you have that time to retake it if you need to take it. I would encourage you to use some sort of online resource and some sort of structured opportunity to prepare for the test if you're more of a structured learner, so that you can or go through some GRE prep books like from the library, Barnes & Noble, or your local bookstore. There are a number of online resources, and taking some practice exams. I cannot stress enough the importance of taking practice exams. Taking a standardized test is a difficult process. You need to familiarize yourself with the components of the GRE so that you, and the format in which it's going to be provided. So taking practice exams will help you to do that. And the more practice exams you take, the more proficient you'll be with taking that exam, okay? And so I would encourage you to start at least a year in advance with preparing to take the GRE. Some programs will require the GRE for funding. And so how many of you are aware that most graduate programs do not require you to pay for a graduate education? Not enough of you know that. Okay, now all of you know that. So typically a graduate degree is free. Many programs will tie taking the GRE to getting funding, because some funding opportunities at graduate schools will require it. And so at our institution, fellowships require a student to take a GRE, okay? So they can be considered for this particular funding opportunity. And here are some helpful resources. Yes?
How many graduate schools would you suggest applying to?
And so that's really going to come down to preference and also resources, right? And so I've heard of students applying to 4 or more, graduate programs. Some students only apply to 1. I would encourage you not to apply to just 1. That would be putting your eggs all in one basket. I would encourage you to diversify, look at a number of graduate programs, but don't just apply willy-nilly. You want to apply to programs that you are most interested in and have the research or have the preparation or the outcomes associated with what you want to do next. Okay? But there is no defined number, but I would say at least 3, if not more. Yes?
So is the GRE geared towards a specific major, or is it for every major?
It's typically for every major. And so there are some disciplines, non-STEM disciplines that don't require the GRE, that the GRE doesn't test for. And so those disciplines wouldn't be required to take the GRE. But they, by and large, it's quantitative, and so it tests your math. It tests verbal skills through the verbal reasoning section, and it also tests your writing skills through the analytical writing component. And so there are some category specific, like physics or biology. I don't know if they do the biology one, but physics specific tests that you can take in the GRE, but the standard exam has those three components: the quantitative, the verbal reasoning, the verbal reasoning, and the analytical writing.
Would you ever know what the recommended expected scores are to get on the GRE?
And that differs from discipline to discipline. I can only speak confidently about engineering. So I would say, on average, for our College of Engineering, the quantitative reasoning is very well regarded as being, I won't say well regarded, is used in the evaluation of students for entry into graduate programs, although some programs are starting to get away from utilizing the GRE for a number of reasons. But I would say in engineering, the average student profile, that's the profile of a student who was just recently admitted in 2016, the average for us was 164, which is 81st percentile, or no, 87th percentile. And the verbal reasoning was, I'd say 74th or 78th percentile, and the writing is about 3.5. And so that's just in engineering. And so you may see something different in physics, something different in biology. There's a myriad. And so what I would suggest in order to get a good gauge of what's acceptable and is to go to that program's website. Generally, they'll have some information posted about the profile of a typical student, or they may even have GRE requirements listed on their website. But at the very least, you can reach out to the graduate program and find out if they have any minimum scores that they're looking for. Yes.
Does the number of times that you take the GRE affect your chances in getting to graduate school?
So, not that I'm aware of. And so in the programs in our College of Engineering, there is no impact on the number of times a student has taken a GRE. We've seen students take the GRE multiple times. I've seen students take it as many as 3 times. And that has no bearing. We only look at the most recent score.
I was just going to comment on that. It's like the ACT where you can like send the score you want them to see. So
Yeah, so you would designate that school when you take the GRE, and so I've seen students send the first score and then take it after they've applied, and then have that second score sent as well. And so we'll only see the scores that you have sent to the institution. Yes.
Like, okay, let's say you send 2 scores, you got to based on the best score, or like you said, the most recent score.
That is at the discretion of the program. Say our graduate school only looks at the most recent score. But graduate programs may take the highest score into consideration when they're evaluating you for admission. It's really at the discretion of the program, and that's a question that you'd want to ask. Any other questions? So here are some resources where you can find some information about preparing for the GRE. It's a computer-based exam, and you want to make sure that you submit those scores with your application materials by listing the institutions to which you want to apply in the GRE system, okay, so that your scores will be sent over. And I already mentioned the funding link, and here are some additional resources as well. Caitlin, will these be posted? You said they're going to be online, so students will have an opportunity to get these links or access these links?
I don't know. I can find out after the session.
Okay. All right. If not, then is there a way maybe I can send this later
Yeah,
and they
definitely.
can disseminate it to,
We
to
can
the
definitely
students.
find a way.
All right. Are there any other questions? That's the end of the presentation for me. Yes.
Based on your experience, what would you say was your biggest obstacle when it comes to
My biggest obstacle.
I don't know. What is wrong?
I won't say it was necessarily an obstacle, but I had the most difficulty with crafting the statement of purpose because that took so much time. And so I would recommend that you start working on that about 6 months before and just writing down everything you think you might want to include and just editing from there. And so, because you want to make sure you're not leaving anything out. And sometimes it takes, a little bit of time for that creativity to come through, or you've, developed a new skill during the course of that 6 months, but you don't want to do it too, you don't want to not allow yourself enough time to make sure that it's a well-refined document and that it conveys everything that you want to convey. And so I think it took me about a good 4 or 5 months just to write a strong one. Any other questions? Yes.
What do you think is the biggest thing you look for when you're, sorry, when you're looking things over? Like, I mean, I know GPA is really important, things like that, but what do you think draws you to a student the most? Like, I'm assuming that it probably most has to do with the statement of purpose, but like what in it?
What in it?
Something that you see.
I would say some passion. Passion for either that work or what you want to do after you've gotten this degree. The experience. So that tends to come across in really strong statement of purposes. Why it is that you want to do this. What is that going to allow you to do in the future? What is it you want to change, about the world? How are you going to then contribute to science or society? And how will this program help you to do that? Having a sense of that is really powerful because it shows that a student has thought, about how all these pieces and parts fit together. This may have been a lifetime journey. You may have, grown up as a child and have, a fervent interest in say, germs. And then you, loved science. And as a undergraduate student, you started doing research in a microbiology lab. And how have those experiences helped to develop you and helped to prepare you for, applying to a microbiology graduate program? What do you want to do next? And so those tend to be the most powerful, the ones where you have a story that really captivates the audience based on your passion, why it is you really want to do this and why this is important to you, and how this program is going to help you to do that.
For the graduate school.
Yes.
Oh,
And I also want to follow up letters of recommendation. And so I tend to pay a lot of attention to letters of recommendation because for those very reasons that I mentioned to you here, they're an opportunity for individuals to really convey why it is they think that you're a good person for this not for the position, but for this role as a student. Your work ethic, your academic preparation, your drive, your perseverance, your initiative. All of those things are things we're looking for in a graduate student, and so seeing that really does say a lot about an individual.
So the process for graduate school is, once you apply, is there an interview process?
So some programs do have interviews, some do not. And so that would be something that you would ask of the graduate program whether or not they have an interview process. Yes.
You say being a minority plays such a factor in the overall competitive aspect of what applying to grad school?
And so how so?
Like as far as the section 4, like when you apply, did they set forward to target minorities, or is it more of a aspect that you had to put a little more into, you had to work a little bit harder to the lowest ranked for?
Gotcha. Very good question, and thank you for that. So for me, our program was interested in increasing minority participation. But also for me, I didn't need to position myself as a minority student necessarily during my application, because I actually received my PhD from my undergraduate institution with my undergraduate research advisor, who was the chair of the department. I still had to get admitted, right? But I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I was lucky in that regard because I loved working with her. And she was actually the person who convinced me to go and pursue a PhD. Until that point, I thought I wanted to go to medical school. And so it wasn't until I had done that research experience that I realized that research was what I wanted to do. I was fortunate in that regard. Yes. Oh, thank you. All right, we're almost at time.